but it is us being able to see through the lens of social media, through the lens of instant real-time access. You have a 24/7 feed that is seeing the surges of the waves take over, right, our lives. What is the impact of that?
It is possible for you to make change because with every one person who decides, I'm going to do something better, I'm going to do something different, eventually that equates to millions and millions and millions of people. Hey, everybody, it's Bianca.
And it's Amelia. Welcome back, Evolvers. I cannot wait to get into this episode. As a matter of fact, when I had suggested this to Bianca, we have a little spreadsheet with some of our, notes or topic recommendations. I had this in all freaking bolds, all bold letters
All
because of
caps,
all caps, because of how important this topic is.
screaming.
So, with that being said, I do want to preface this conversation, this dialogue, this podcast episode to talk about something real that's impacting us all over the world right now. And before I just kind of do a blanket statement of what that is, I want to share with you guys a story about, something that was real and raw by the time this podcast comes out. It was a conversation that honestly I'd been fearing for a decade, and it really rattled me, which is why I want to share it, because I know that this is going to it's going to have a place not only in the Evolve community, but also for what Evolve stands for, the mission.
Mm,
So I was on a coaching call with a client, and she and I have been seeing each other weekly now for just over, I would say, like 3 months, and she's having wonderful progress in her life. Someone who really came from the corners of struggling with ADHD, really struggling to even like have a strong trajectory in one direction. And if you're an ADHD or someone on the neurodivergent end, you know how challenging it can be to stay focused, right? Now, she was a woman who is a single mom, recently had gone through a divorce, and she she's very entrepreneurial and has an entrepreneurial spirit. But what we were talking about in this phone call was really about something that was terrifying her and bringing up so many emotions that she was having a really difficult time, number one, processing through, number two, even being able to experience it and kind of navigate and cope with adaptively. And what it was, the day before the Category 5 hurricane, also known as Helene, I believe, or Helene. I, I don't know how to pronounce it, so please forgive me out of my climate insensitivity around that. But ultimately, it was the Category 5 that was planned for, I believe, September 27th, just underneath a month ago in Florida,
mm,
right? And the devastation that was reported, it was one of the, circulated communications around the world. I'm sure you guys saw something on your feed about it, of just like how climate activists, how meteorologists are crying because there's been from the so many signs, so many people, so much data that has accumulated and amounted to where what the damage was going to be and predicted based on scientific models, right, was going to be like a catastrophe. And this is one of many, a chain of events that are happening around the world in terms of climate issues, right? And it's not just something that I'm here to talk about in terms of climate change, whether you believe in that or not. I think the science is pretty freaking clear at this point. But it the dialogue that she and I were having was around what this topic is all about, which is we are not emotionally prepared to handle this, meaning the catastrophes that are coming and that are here when it comes to climate change and
mm,
everything that the world right now is headed into. And now I'm not saying there's all doom and gloom, right? But what I do know, based on not only that session that we had, but all of the research that I've personally done to be in that moment and even know there's only so much that I can do for someone who has, and I had shared this with the Evolve team, probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe even at this point, someone who has traveled around some of the most purest points of nature, And what we thought was, you know, a biodiverse area of the world that really contributed to the ecosystems that allow us as human beings to survive. One of them being the Great Barrier Reef, right? I had mentioned to our team when I had traveled there doing research, we actually really saw what looked like a Great Barrier Reef, but it looked like a graveyard, right? Bones of coral just completely bleached. Why do I mention that? Well, I haven't talked about that a lot on this podcast and honestly super publicly, but so much of the compound effect of humans' choices and what we have been ill equipped to navigate and equip ourselves with has compounded to what we're experiencing in terms of nature atrocities across the globe, right? So seeing an underwater graveyard when little Amelia was shown pictures of this thriving biodiverse ecosystem was heartbreaking. And so why I do what I do today is so much inspired through
Mhm.
sustainability, climate efforts, et cetera, right? And so I bring that into the fold of this conversation because the client that I was talking to, she had her mother was still in Florida hunkering down. And her mother had lied to her saying that she's going to be fine, saying that she had evacuated. Like her mom in that situation was trying to do the best that she could because she was an elderly woman who didn't have plans to face a level 5 category hurricane, right? The destruction, all of that, which meteorologists, climate activists, scientists who study this through and through, she did not have a plan to be able to handle that. So, in conversation with her daughter, who's now states away, she is trying to emotionally cope with something that people of generations have had to experience, like the knowing that someone from a distant land that we care about might undergo some things in the climate world that we might not ever hear about. But when you have real time live updates of your mother as an elderly woman trying to hunker down and face the atrocities that are to come, the emotional experience that someone has to go through when mom doesn't know what to do. Mom doesn't have resources to get out. Mom doesn't know or has ever been equipped to kind of handle something like this. Mom has to lie to her kids and say, honestly, I'm going to be okay, right? What can you do and what can you say in that situation? Right?
Mm.
It was just fascinating to hear some of these real-time stories, and this is like not something that is rare anymore. These dialogues around what we're experiencing around the world that we could have never fathomed of at one point as a human species, that were just tales that were told that one day might happen. We're experiencing that now.
Mhm.
And so my claim to this episode is that we are genuinely not emotionally prepared. We do not have the emotional intelligence. We do not have the emotional scaffolding and the coping skills to handle what it feels like to have your mother across the country calling you and saying she's going to be okay when she's full well not going to be. When you have deaths of human beings, when you see animals being completely destroyed, when you see habitats and people of a wide plethora of community being completely destroyed, devastated, having nothing left.
Mm.
How do you deal with that? Right. So, this is a really heavy topic, and I recognize this, but ultimately, it's the climate anxiety. It's the impact that it has on all of us, not just whether or not you had someone in Florida impacted directly. It's the collective impact of these choices that are compounding to be what we experience right now and what our children are going to be experiencing, right? That eco grief, that climate doom, the eco worry. I had a stat that I wanted to bring into this for purposes of this conversation. 59%, 59% of people 16 to 25 years old globally reported to be either very or extremely worried about the climate and the climate crisis that we're experiencing. So just think about worry and then think about climate crisis. The worry, the mental health impact of that when we don't have the emotional preparation on how to actually navigate that, how to deal with that, how to cope with that, and what to do about that. I see that as something that's going to continue to be a really big struggle for not just those who are directly affected, like my client whose mother was literally right in the path of this hurricane and who had a life that was devastated as a result of that. But it
Mhm.
is us being able to see through the lens of social media, through the lens of instant real time access. You have a 24/7 feed that is seeing the surges of the waves take over, right? Our lives. What is the impact of that? Right. So, my goal in this episode is to recognize and not turn away from that big crisis because if we have children right now, they're experiencing this, right? If we're
Mm.
seeing this, it's not just those who are impacted directly. We are all impacted by this. And I want to get more curious, especially given Evolve's mission, around what tools we do have at our disposal to start, if we haven't started yet, emotionally preparing for the challenges that are going to happen and that are going to continue to happen. And what from either an IFS, a CBT, an ACT, so many different modalities that we do have available to us. How do we help people around the world, our families, our children really navigate the pervasive worries, the pervasive mental health impacts of
Mm.
this? That's the question. That's the hope that I hope to kind of put into this world through Evolve. So, B, when you hear me talk about this, when you hear me tell this story, what's coming up for you as a clinician? Because I think
Mhm.
it's a conversation that honestly I don't hear a lot of clinicians having, and it's a wildly under discussed topic, which I believe directly impacts to the worsening of this issue.
I agree. Before I answer that, this is exactly what started Evolve. You going to the Great Barrier Reef and having that experience really set in motion for you the mission and the sense of purpose of I can and am obligated to make an impact. And because of the amount of belief that you have within yourself, which I say this on almost every episode at this point. I wish more people believed in themselves the way that you did. I wish I believed in myself the way that you do, but
Girl, you're climbing your own
we're
ladder, and I see that.
we're
I saw
working on it. We're working on it. We're getting there. But most people don't have the level of self-belief that you do, and so when they see atrocities happen from a CBT lens, they don't have the belief that they can handle it. This is a much more nuanced dialogue, and we're going to solely focus on the mental health aspect of it because there are a lot of other components that unfortunately play into this, like the weaponization of science and climate change, the weaponization of different belief structures,
Mm.
the amount of like fake news and all of that other stuff that's out there that just like doesn't report things accurately because everyone has their own agenda of what they're trying to say. Like the fact that people still think climate change is not real.
That's
It,
wild. Like,
it's
wild.
there's so much tied into it, and we're not here to talk about politics. That's not the point. But the point is, why aren't we taking action? Why aren't we doing any of these things? From a CBT lens, it really, and IFS and all of these other aspects, it comes down to the belief structures that we maintain.
Mhm.
Hello, my name is Bree. So I would say my experience at Evolve has been absolutely amazing. I have learned and grown and done so many things that I didn't imagine that I'd be doing just over a year ago. So I'm really happy to be a part of the team and I encourage anyone who has the opportunity to join. Yeah, so this is an experience that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else. So it's definitely unique and there's so many like-minded people, whether it's on the team or in our community, that can be by your side and support you. So that is an awesome experience.
People don't I think there's multiple layers to this. Number 1, people don't have the belief enough that they're getting the right information. We have copious amounts of information out there, but because nobody trusts anybody anymore, because of weaponization, because of all of these other things, nobody trusts that they're getting the right information, and so there are a lot of people who just outright deny it.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people who outright deny and develop counter beliefs to what the data and what the science is saying. Number 2, people don't believe that they're responsible. I remember having
Mm.
a conversation with someone that I love very dearly who I don't remember exactly what he was doing, but he did something. It was something around I think he was smoking a cigar or something, and he threw it out the window, and I made a comment around, you know, stuff like this is why, like, the earth is going to, like, destroy itself eventually, or, like, the earth is gonna kill us all off. And he said something that I know a lot of people say, which is, "Well, it's not gonna be in my lifetime, so it doesn't really matter."
Oh,
Or, like,
yeah, the nihilism.
when people litter, or when these organizations, these really terrible because of the methods that they are practicing, these terrible organizations who don't care about climate change at all are using unethical sources to get their product out, and using fossil fuel and using all of these things because it's cheaper than using alternative methods. There's this significant sense of, "It's not my responsibility. It has nothing to do with me. It's not gonna impact me. It's not gonna impact my lifetime, so I don't have to deal with it." Or, like, what I do, yeah, this might impact somebody in one of those countries over there,
Right.
but that doesn't impact me, so, oh, well. I think those are 2 significant aspects of it. I think a third really significant aspect of it is this overwhelming sense of hopelessness and fear that we all have, that what am I supposed to do about this? When these billion-dollar organizations can get away with anything that they want to, or when millions and millions of people all over the world don't care, or are outright denying these things, or are ignoring these things, what am I supposed to do? Like, okay, I
Mm.
recycled, but this person isn't, and this person isn't, and this person isn't, and this person's doing whatever they want. So how is this going to impact me? Or how can
Yeah.
I make an impact?
Yeah.
To use the example of that person, your client, her mother, she had zero belief in herself that she was capable of doing something. She
I
had no
know.
belief in herself that she was capable of leaving that situation or getting herself to safety or whatever, and so she had to construe a narrative within herself that, "No, no, no, it's fine, I'm gonna be okay. This happens all the time here." Like, Hurricane Milton just happened in Florida, like, a month later. And that one was they reported it to be, I think, a category 6, and it only ended up being a category 2 or 3, so it wasn't that bad, but from the previous one, they're still finding dead bodies
Mm.
all over the place. So, like, the level of the amount that we have to distort our own thinking and our own belief structures to navigate these really horrific situations that are happening is
Mm.
it's incomprehensible. There's so much fear in this world, and there's so much helplessness, and it's really one of the things it's one of the biggest reasons why we're doing what we are doing here at Evolve. It's not just about mental health, it's about the way that mental health impacts everything and how everything is impacted. Everything impacts our mental health, and our mental health impacts everything regarding the globe, regarding other people, regarding businesses, regarding medicine, regarding
Mhm.
so many of these facets. And being a listener of this show, being an evolver, part of the Evolve community, you have a direct hand in that. And so this episode is
Yeah.
more heavy, and that's okay. Being a part of this community, you get to do something different. You get to make choices for yourself and within your family and in your community that are going to have a positive impact. We
Mm.
don't believe that one person can make an impact, but all of this started because Amelia felt this immense sense of purpose and this immense sense of pain that drove her purpose of I can and will do something about this. And she impacted me, and the entire Evolve team is now positively impacted by this. And the thousands of listeners that we have, and the hundreds of clients that we collectively have, look at how much change happened by one person. And now
Mhm.
I know a lot of you might be thinking, well, I'm not like Amelia. You're not, and I'm not, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a positive impact on the people around you by you making better choices. So I hope that
So
this
true.
episode helps you feel as though it is possible for you to make change. Because with every one person who decides, I'm going to do something better, I'm going to do something different, eventually that equates to millions and millions and millions of people. And that's
Mm.
how we collectively make a positive and adaptive change. And being part of the Evolve community and supporting Evolve is going to be one of the ways in which you can help an incredible organization make really amazing changes in this world, because in the next 10 to 15 years, that is something that we're going to be doing. We're already
1,000%.
working towards it. And thank you
Mm.
for being who you are and recognizing that and being the groundbreaker in that, or the trailblazer, groundbreaker, whatever the word is.
I like
Thank
both
you
of
for being
them.
you.
A ground healer, maybe more preferred just in the
Ooh.
context of this conversation, but, I'll take it. So one of the biggest things, in closing for me, right, like, and just to really honor what B you had said there, I really appreciate that, so deeply, so freaking deeply. The biggest thing like, around this aspect, and this is kind of what I close with clients, which is for anyone that's listening and resonating with this, what can we do? The biggest thing comes around cultivating hope and resilience. And when it comes to the CBT aspect, the IFS aspect, right? Like that's the biggest thing. We need to be able to understand to what you just said, B. We as a single organism have an impact. Why? Because we do not operate as single organisms. We all have families, we all have friends, we all have people that we connect with at work, and our one tiny decision has a ripple effect on other people. For example, I decided to phase out meat from my from consuming, right? So I'm in that process, and pretty much I would say 95% of what I eat is all plant-based. And that was at one point a dream for me because I never really aligned with killing animals. Although I do know biologically there's a purpose for the protein, quote unquote, right? And everyone has a different choice around that. That one choice to phase that out and to instead be more aligned has given hope to the people in my life that they actually can have a plant-based diet that is macronutriently safe and it doesn't have more degrading impacts on the climate. That has rippled out into people thinking about, what can I do? So again, you mentioned the recycling thing. Just because I recycle and my neighbor doesn't mean that I don't have an impact. You can cultivate areas of hope even by looking at the beliefs that you have. So for example, the world is doomed. I know someone that's incredibly nihilistic that is choosing not to have children, right, which is actually very common at this stage now. Because of the fact that they believe that the world is doomed within their lifetime. And so the CBT lens, right, around reframing unhelpful thoughts, if that is unhelpful for you to just continue operating the ways that you are, being a destructive organism, right? What could that be reframed to cultivate a little bit more hope and resilience, right? There are things that I can do to maybe compact or combat these impacts around climate change, right? There's choices that I can make in my consumerism, right? There's a huge dialogue going on around the impacts of fast fashion as opposed to upcycling. There's someone in my trauma cohort who she had written, pause on a broccoli rubber band, and I had recognized that and celebrated that because she was like, she said something along the lines of like, "I needed a reminder." And she wasn't ready to go get a tattoo, but she needed a reminder. So she didn't necessarily go out and consume and get something. She actually took what she already had within her kitchen to be helpful in her world. And that one tiny reminder, the way in which she chose to upcycle a rubber band that she used on her, or that came with her broccoli, right? That's one less thing that one I would say one more thing that she's doing in the world that is making a positive impact, that's cultivating that resilience and that hope in the world. And it might not be directly towards that climate change, but it has an impact. Those choices over time have an impact, and each one of us have the ability to do that, right? And so we really never know who might see that, who might be inspired by that, and what that impact can contribute to in terms of a ripple effect. So,
You can either be, I want to make sure that I say this and before we wrap up. You
yeah.
can either be terrified or inspired and empowered by the fact that every single choice you make has an impact. Most people are scared of that fact because they don't want that level of responsibility. They don't want that level of, oh my God, everything that I do matters. I hope that being a part of the Evolve community, you see the empowerment in that, that you have the power to make really incredible change using that cognitive reframing to
Mhm.
understand that your choices matter. You can do something about it. And it is our collective mission as human beings, all sharing this earth and this planet, to do better for each other and for ourselves and for our family. So, again, some semi heavy episode, and that's okay. It's okay to sit in the discomfort of this. It's okay to reflect on this and to make a choice about how to proceed forward now that you have this information at your disposal.
Mhm.
And what is your episode suggestion?
My episode suggestion is 291 Motivation Monday, three simple conflict resolution tools you need to know as it pertains to this topic. That is always something, right? There was a conflict in that client where she knew that her mother was lying to her, and we addressed the conflict that was there. She didn't want to be lied to, right? So there's little things that spin off this whole topic that, our UDU program is great to really dip your toe into. And these skills on this podcast episode that we give in there is a great kind of dipping your toe into some of those. What about you, B?
Facts. Number 340, finally putting an end to self doubt. We hope you feel empowered by this episode, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.